Welcome, everyone, to our August 2025 edition of AZBioPEERS. AZBioPEERS is a program that is hosted by the Arizona Bioindustry Association, or AZBio, that provides our community with the resources, the information, and the connections that they need. And so we are thrilled today to have one of our most popular AZBioPEERS sessions, Tales from the Road. And we're going to hear a little bit about a journey that started here in Arizona that has been exciting. The company was named an AZBio Fast Lane company and honored at the AZBio Awards. And wait till you hear where they've gone from here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our manager of the AZBioPEERS program, Dr. Dylan P.A. Dylan, take it away.
Thank you very much, Joan. And thank you, Kiran, for taking the time to speak with our members and share your story.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for inviting me.
So, Kiran, could you just give yourself just a brief introduction?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. And first of all, thanks, Joan, for inviting me, and thanks, Dylan, for making it possible. I see many of my colleagues on the line. I'm Kiran Avancha. Those of you who know me, I wear multiple hats. The particular hat that I'm wearing today in sharing my Tales from the Road series is in regards to my role in co-founding priZm Therapeutics, as well as running it as their CEO for the last 4 years. And the journey will be shared here based on what we have done so far on priZm Therapeutics.
Great. Thank you so much, Karen. And yes, as we were saying today, it's really about pulling back the curtain, sharing lessons from the road that other founders can learn from. So, Karen, when you started priZm, what was your original dream, and how close have you come to that dream?
Yeah, I mean, the dream was big. We honestly, I'll straight away let you know that we probably might have achieved only a portion of the dream, or even like the basement of the dream has been accomplished very successfully. So the dream was to build a biotech in the space of rare, ultra rare diseases, where the inspiration came from a few personal stories of some of our co-founders in regards to pediatric rare diseases, where there are about 7,000 plus rare diseases that are underrepresented and understudied. Unfortunately, there is a lack of resources in studying these rare diseases, but they impact truly the families. They're no longer rare in its nature, because if you combine the number of patients that actually um, uh, get impacted by these rare diseases, it's almost like 64, 65 million patients that get impacted by these rare, ultra rare diseases. And a lot of them have genetic origin. I mean, a lot of them have specific origins within. Some of them were studied as their origins, but some we still don't have science in or put in data in regards to what these diseases look like. So about 4 years ago, what happened was right at the time of COVID, we started highlighting some of these these rare diseases that academia was not able to get any resources, especially because of the COVID pandemic. So a lot of research got stalled because there were resources that were diverted towards these towards the pandemic. Of course, it's needed and warranted. And a very, very good colleague and a friend of mine out of University of Miami reached out asking us for our help in terms of bringing this molecule that really had over 30 years of academic and clinical research, bench research and clinical research that couldn't get enough resources to. So that created a light bulb moment for us that, hey, imagine that there are these types of opportunities that are sitting somewhere in a lab on a shelf. What can we do to accelerate innovation by bringing these drugs into the patient population that mostly need those drugs? So that was the origin of our thought. That's the original thought process. And since then, we built a company around it. We called it priZm Therapeutics. We brought this asset out of University of Miami academic system and put it into our a vehicle of priZm. And since then, the mission started in terms of raising enough capital to bring this asset into clinical trials. And my experience in running large academic as well as community-based healthcare research and clinical research programs across US has helped me in understanding what type of resources would be needed in conducting this type of a specific focused small population clinical research, but can provide major impact for these patients. I don't know if that helped or explained in terms
No,
of origins in general.
certainly. Yeah, certainly. That gives a very great idea into the origins. And when we think about rare disease, we know navigating rare disease is notoriously challenging. And what kept you going during some of the toughest stretches? And kind of how did the Arizona ecosystem play a role?
Yeah, so that's a very good question in terms of rare diseases itself. Again, as I said, there's not a lot of data sets that will be readily available for rare diseases because they're, again, studied in pockets. It's not like cancer where you could go ahead and study it across large patient population, right? So they're very targeted and focused approach, and it's mostly done through academic institutions. So getting the data from academia is the biggest challenge. So how do you take an approach of ensuring that that data set is of right quality and highest quality? That has been the biggest challenge for launching our rare disease company because we didn't realize that that's going to be the biggest challenge, but we thought that would be academia does research, so we know for sure that there is data out there, so we could translate. But for us to bring the academic research together onto one platform has been our major build aspect in the company itself. So it took us a few years, at least a year and a half, 2 years, to bring that entire research program that's been done in multiple institutions. It's not only, so this academic research was done at Veterans Hospital, was done in University of Chicago and then University of Miami. So and various other pockets in Europe. So our initial goal was to bring all that research together onto this platform of priZm, and then eventually identifying what the right regulatory pathway for us was to get the drug approved, and that was our major struggle. As far as the ecosystem is concerned, I think we were able to leverage a few resources, especially in the valley. But I wish I could have leveraged a bit more. I knew that there is the Critical Path Institute in Tucson. We did try to leverage their resources, but it had I don't think they were studying this disease. And so when we approached them, would you be willing to study this disease that we were trying to solve? It's called MCT8 deficiency or Allan-Herndon-Dudley syndrome. And they were like, no, it's not part of our mandate in CPAT. That just made me think. I mean, we don't have enough resources, honestly, to study several of these multiple rare diseases because, as I said, there are 7,000 plus of these types of rare diseases that are known to us. And imagine that then there are several hundreds and thousands of diseases that might not be known to us either. So I know there are a few other organizations that are studying rare diseases, but to bring a drug that has already shown some impact in this patient population into broader patients within that MCT8 deficiency has been a major challenge.
Yeah, sure. The just trying to imagine being able to collect enough data to really show the impact of the drug is, I imagine, very, very difficult to kind of navigate.
Yeah, and to that, Dylan, I would also like to share. I mean, the incidence or the prevalence of this disease is that MCT8, or let me touch upon what this disease is. It's called MCT8 deficiency. It's monocarboxylase transporter protein 8 deficiency. It's an X-linked genetic disorder. It impacts only boys at this point, and we do know the females are the carriers, and these boys don't even survive beyond 16, 17 years of age. And the symptoms are similar to cerebral palsy. And a lot of these cerebral palsy cases are put into this general bucket of cerebral palsy, not necessarily um, having enough detailed workup being done in several of these cerebral palsy cases to exactly know what the origins of this disease could be. So in this case, we're very fortunate to have the world-renowned experts on this MCT8 deficiency as my co-founders. Out of University of Miami Health System and University of Chicago Health System, Drs. Roy Weiss and Dr. Samuel Refatoff. They both have been phenomenal in studying this disease for the last 3 decades plus. And they have dedicated their entire resources across from NIH, and they have gotten a unbroken NIH funding for over 35, 40 years to study this disease and finally identify a drug that could benefit these patient population. And so the prevalence is in about 1 in 70,000 male individuals. So you're talking about 1 in close to 150,000 total population. So it's definitely a rare to an ultra rare as per FDA's designation. So we had to go through an entire regulatory pathway to first of all get orphan designation, then rare pediatric designation, orphan designation both here in US as well as in Europe, and rare pediatric designation in US. That makes us eligible for a program that FDA had created called the priority review program. So we're eligible for the priority review program as part of the drug development process.
And so, as we're looking back at your journey, what would you say the most unexpected detour that your company faced was? And how were you able to kind of navigate that? Like we talked about, the gathering the data wasn't you didn't expect that to be your largest challenge, but really what was the most unexpected thing that you faced?
I guess like any other founder, you always believe that people can understand the story very easily, because when you talk about, hey, here is a disease that has a potential opportunity for solution. Here is the science. Here is the amazing data that's currently available based upon our drug, and it's not toxic. It has shown clinical efficacy. It's significantly de-risked. So I was very surprised to see that, when you show the investors, right? Okay, it's significantly de-risked, doesn't have any regulatory major hurdles. We know where the patient population is in order for us to bring this drug into clinic I mean, when I say clinic, into market, we thought this would be a straight straight road. But oh boy, it's very unfortunate that and this was also a period, I got to be honest, and this was one of the interesting periods that we launched our company, right? It was in 2020, 2021. COVID was at its height. A lot of resources were being diverted, or investments were being made into COVID research, and that should be. And when you talk to the VCs or any investors, the biggest challenge would always be, oh my God, how are you going to find this market? It's as if you hear a different tone from the investors completely. The question then didn't become, is it can you solve this disease, versus the biggest aha moment was always for me was, what's the commercial value? How much are we going to make on this? Um, and it is true. I mean, as in the biotech space, you do need to make sure that you understand that. And to my surprise, what came out from this whole journey was that large VCs don't think that a 200 to $300 million per year market is considered a big enough market for them. I was really taken back by that. I was kind of like, so you're okay to make investments that can fail before a first clinical data set was being put in place, but you're not okay with a fully de-risked program with a $200 million potential market cap, on a year over year with no competition. So
Right.
it's an eye opener for me. So I think many of the colleagues on the call might realize this. I'm also an investor myself, because as part of HonorHealth System, I'm the Chief Innovation Officer, and my role it was to make strategic investments into opportunities. And I was really surprised that this is an area that not a lot of investors were trying to take potential look at. And I think that's an opportunity where I believe that future rare disease investable vehicle can come into place in the VC sector.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of opportunity in that space. And so kind of thinking about you have the business hat, you have the scientist hat. Were there any moments when you felt the mission of PRIZM, helping patients? Did you ever feel that that was at odds with the business realities?
You know, from the beginning, I mean, we knew why we wanted to launch PRIZM for. Our conviction was very clear. We really we believe that there is enough science behind this. There is also strong science, given that the amount of clinical and preclinical data that was published by my colleagues, my co-founders. It's a very strong science, and there is no other drug or no other therapy that's out there for these patients, and these patients have no other choice. Unfortunately, the best supportive care doesn't cut out for these patients. These patients will be on gastric feeding tube. They can't sit, walk. As I said, they're completely bedridden or wheelchair bound. Their mobility, they have very no mobility at all, and they need a 24/7 round the care. So imagine if we could solve a problem or a situation or a disease such as this. It has both neurological aspects of it as well as endocrinology origins that go into neurological aspects. There is a solution that's out there, which is a small molecule that can potentially bring these patients to some sort of a quality of life, bring highest quality of life for these patient population. Our mission has always been to bring that highest quality of life, for these patient population, so that these caregivers reduce the caregiver burden, increase the quality for these patients, these boys. At least they don't have this hyper metabolic situation. They don't have, because a lot of these kids die because of hypermetabolic conditions, and also increased heart rates, say various other cardiovascular issues. The drug was able to solve majority of those issues and was able to bring these patients. Because how do we know this? Because there is a significant amount of longitudinal data that exists in this patient population by using our own drug, where our clinicians using the academic channels have administered this drug for patients and they were on this drug for about like 10 years. So there was 10 years worth of data that they published. But then beyond that, there were about 7 years of unpublished data onto which these patients actually survived. So what tells me is that, look, here you have an amazing, amazing opportunity to solve this problem, at least one problem less, right? And our conviction has always been to that we would be able to bring this in front of potential investors, but at the same time, potential strategic partners. We were never unwavered in our commitment, but was it not frustrating? If I'm not telling that it's frustrating to, then I would be lying. So it is frustrating in terms of for us in terms of uh, when you are being passed by over 400 potential investors. So we must have reached over to over 400 plus potential investors in the space, and it's unfortunate. All you would need, and I think the biggest answer that anyone would give, or the answer that any entrepreneur would give, is all you need is a one yes, right? You don't. So the 399, it doesn't matter. So, uh, but it's unfortunate. I feel it's unfortunate for those people who might not have who had the potential to do this, but were not ready to do that, or didn't take that enough. So none of us have a crystal ball, and I keep telling this as an investor myself. And I say, when anyone comes up and says, "Oh, I know that this field is going to go," I mean, none of us have a crystal ball. You only have educated guesses in the space. Don't tell me that this drug is going to get approved and this drug is not going to get approved. It's a calculated guess based upon the science, based upon the regulated pathway. It's as calculated as anything else. But unfortunately, it just became a gambling exercise for a lot of investors. So.
Sure. Yeah, the risk there, and that's really their focus is going to be, that level of risk and what's the return going to be.
Yeah, and I'm very surprised. I mean, now this whole when I see the AI revolution and aspects in terms of how these things happen, the valuations and everything are like, oh, if you're talking about a small valuation, they think that there is no value. I'm like, that's not right. I mean, you can generate value by bootstrapping and create and generate the value by providing enough clinical benefit to these patients in general. And yes, insurance will pay for several of these, because if you're going to say so, we did an interesting exercise very early on. We wanted to identify how much it would cost for these patients to not get any supportive care treatment, or not get any of our treatment, and identify how much would be the cost. So a standard insurance would end up spending anywhere between $800,000 to $900,000 per year per this patient. That's a lot of money in terms of. Now, when we identified all the outcomes that our drug would be able to provide for this patient population, we were able to save anywhere between $600,000 to $800,000.
Wow.
That's a lot of money that we were able to save just on the system itself.
Mm-hmm.
And apart from the clinical benefit, the amazing clinical benefit that we saw for this patient population. So while doing all this, we had to. You asked an interesting question in terms of did we move into something, or did we have to change our tactics? Yeah, we did have to change our tactics at one point, where we were trying to solve this at the patient level, like at the adult, when they were born, right? I mean, these patients after they were born. We had an interesting prenatal data where we tested it in animal models, and we identified that we were able to treat some of these unborn or pups, mouse pups, before they were born itself, in the womb itself. And so in utero testing was being done in animal models. And we were really surprised by those results. So we studied them for a few years, and our clinicians have studied it prior as well. And we brought this data set in front of FDA, showing them that, hey, could we designed a plan saying that we would like to go into prenatal setting, wanted to go treat a pregnant mother uh, carrying these male fetuses with this deficiency so that we could correct them inborn itself. So that was a very bold yet a very pivoting thing where we said, can we make a differentiation? Instead of increasing just the quality of life, can we go after targeting the disease itself completely, with the curative intent for the disease itself? Because we realized that the earlier that we could go ahead and treat these patients before their neurological symptoms come into effect, we may be in a position to reverse at least or altogether halt or stop those neurological issues. So with that intent, we approached FDA and we completely designed a new study. And we convinced FDA that we should be treating this early on. And to our surprise and to everybody's surprise, FDA did give us the authorization to go treat pregnant mothers carrying this male MCT8 fetus. And the story then became so surreal for us when we identified a mother who was carrying twin male fetuses with this disease, MCT deficient. So in clinical research, I think it's like when someone says, "Oh, there is a white crow, show me one white crow," and then if you show two white crows, then it's like really you're hitting a grand slam kind of a thing, right? So we showed that to FDA and we asked FDA, "Hey, we know that you gave us the authorization to treat a single pregnant mother." But would you allow us to treat a pregnant mother carrying twin male fetuses? That's a completely different protocol in total. And again, FDA comes back and says, "Yeah, go ahead. We believe that based on the science that you have shown, we can go ahead and allow you to treat." So that journey began in 2023. So 23 onwards, we were completely our heads down. We knew at that point in time, okay, what is it that we need to prove from a clinical benefit? Can we show that these patients who are before, when they were born, these boys are able to lift their heads, are able to sit up, are able to show neuromotor skills right from 3 months or 4 months. You could show all the way when they were like, when they're breastfeeding, even at that stage itself, because the neuromotor skills are so interlinked, right? In the breastfeeding and everything. And we treated the mother. So the mother became the patient. So she started taking our drug so that it could go down to these boys, to fetuses. And I think that became the reason why the AZBio Fast Lane Award, we were one of the Fast Lane Award recipients in 2024. And long story short, that the boys were born. The twins are now almost 2 years old. They're doing extremely well. So our clinical data hit a home run. And so with that, we were able to use this to convince potential strategics to partner with us.
So always trying to find new ways to navigate, and it's just we found that spark, that the prenatal spark that they. And do you think that was that just gonna, in over time, that's gonna be far more. You're going to save a lot of money. You talked about, just over 1 year what you can save. But if you can prevent something from at birth, I'm assuming that you would save much more money as an insurance company.
Exactly, and that's what I mean. I've been in clinical drug development in oncology for a very long time. And whenever companies would come in and say, "Yeah, we have shown a month of progression-free survival or 2 weeks of progression-free survival," drugs get approved in that space. And I was really surprised to see, and prior to me becoming, prior to me coming down to Honor Health as their chief operating officer at the research institute, I had my own research conducted at the University of Miami Health System, and where I would do cost benefit analysis of several of these new drugs. And what it taught me was like the quality of life or the cost benefit analysis of these drugs in oncology space, where when you are just coming up with a very incremental increase, like a 1 week progression-free survival, and everything. It didn't change much for these patients in general, unless you're drastically changing. Look, there is a complete overall survival in several months or years. That's a huge impact, right, in this patient population. But for me, that's the big issue. So we said, how do we take that and bring it into rare disease space? How do we ensure that we are giving that to the best of the patients for their stuff? It's not just insurance in general. Imagine the amount of caregiving thing that you can reduce the caregiver burden in these patients. The mother of these twins was so happy. I mean, her life changed once the baby started sitting up and were able to sit without support, were able to, um, you know, mumble some words to the mother, which is, I mean, in cerebral palsy cases, imagine that these kids didn't have that type of an approach, right? They were able to stand up with support. These things are priceless for a caregiver, like mother and their family in general.
Yeah, big time. So now to change direction a little bit, kind of moving into policy and regulation impact. What role did like public policy or regulation or any government support play, in shaping your journey?
Yeah, again, very good question. In terms of the policies in general, at first I should thank NIH, right? NIH for funding a significant amount of funding over the last 50 years or 30 years for Dr. Samuel Rafatoff and his lab. And because of that, the research kept continuing and going. Um, and other not-for-profits who helped in throughout the way for supporting this research at both University of Miami and University of Chicago. And even us, when we really went up to the FDA, the public policy in this is there was no policy for FDA to go ahead and how to treat a pregnant mother with twin male fetuses. There wasn't one. But what we identified was if you don't ask FDA, they're not going to tell you. And a lot of companies end up doing this simple mistake of not asking them early on itself. So we turned this around and said, you know what, we're going to take a risk no matter what. We're going to do this with a bootstrap budget. How can we get this to the point where because we believe in in our molecule, we believe in the asset. How can we convince FDA with the existing data set? And now you have you have your world-renowned experts as your co-founder. So it's a complete package in itself for when you go in front of regulators. The biggest challenge with regulators is they're always afraid of what ifs, right? Oh my God, what if something is going to happen? And what if but when you're honestly, it's almost like investors, right? You're de-risking the effort for regulators with the help of science. And probably that's when these regulators will be easy enough in thinking and saying, you know what, that's fine. Let's lax this or let's keep this in a way. Now you see that FDA's thought process has changed a bit. The recent FDA process on rare diseases has been that, come with a very small study. You don't need to come with a very large study. Come with a small study, show that there is enough clinical evidence, and then you go into the market with the post-market research and assets. So that's the new thesis that FDA has put in place for rare disease drugs or approval in the rare disease space, which is interesting. I mean, they completely evolved from where they were, or the double standard gold. The gold standard was the double-blinded, placebo-controlled type of research as such. Yes, you do need those. You do need them when you have enough population. I mean, how many pregnant mothers are you going to come with this type of a disease? I mean, our database had about total of 300, 400 patients in our own, but we knew based on the prevalence that we might have about 1,000 to 1,500 patients in US and about 1,500 patients in Europe. So we're talking about 3,000 patients in between US and Europe. But our database only had like a couple of hundred patients. And of these, I mean, you imagine that the mother who delivered these kids with MCT8 was willing to go pregnant again, and on top of it should have this MCT8 male MCT8 fetus. So you're talking about a 25% chance for another pregnant mother getting a male MCT8 fetus. So it's a lot of uncertainty in getting that kind of a patient population. So you have to show the clinical benefit and clinical efficacy. You have to hit it out of the park, knock it out of the park for the clinical efficacy. So the way that we went up and approached this is with the least amount of patient population can you get with the highest amount of clinical data or efficacy data, would you be able to get the approval? That's the thought process for us. That was the thought process for us.
Yeah. And now, kind of just looking back on your journey overall, what advice would you give to, someone stuck early in their stage with a biotech in Arizona? And especially, if they're looking at rare disease or an underserved community, what advice would you give them as they're, building their company and continuing to grow?
Well, I don't know if I would give an advice, but everybody's journey is different. I would trust their own things. But I would share how we approached, because, everybody's approach is different, as I said, right? And no single entrepreneur's journey is same as the other entrepreneur. Um, so when our co-founders, we all were like trying to make the bid to get this asset into our program, into our company. Uh, the money in the bank for the first time when we were making this bid was about $50,000 in our bank. That's it. And we started interviewing several chief medical officer type of candidates or chief clinical officer type of candidates for our company. And when we approached this amazing, talented individual, Dr. Mustafa Noor, who was our chief clinical officer at that point, who became the chief clinical officer at the point in time, was an industry veteran, has done some amazing work. And we got to know him through several of our connections, network. And his first question was, "Oh, that's amazing. This is a great asset. I mean, what you're trying to do is amazing. How much do you have in the bank for doing this clinical study?" And, we knew that we would need at least $30 million to go get this type of a program done in a traditional setting. Um, can we hack it to bring it down? And that's what we did. We said, all right, can we hack it to the best extent possible to bring it down? And our research yielded to the fact that we can probably get, when we go through this prenatal pathway, we may be able to get it down to $7 to $10 million. I said, okay, that's almost 1/3 of our original thought process, right? And when we asked this chief clinical officer to be part of our program, his first response was, "You wanted, what do you want to do? You want to develop a drug with $50,000 in the bank?" And all we said was yes. Yeah, that's right. We wanted to do it with $50,000. And so the second, the minute his conviction was, he didn't ask us how we are going to raise. He didn't ask us what you're going to do. He said, absolutely, I like your conviction. That's because each person's thing is different, right? How they get motivated. So so the way that we brought our team together was through a lot of, equity-based, sweat equity-based. All of us realized, like any other co-founder, any other founders of the startup, you don't take any salary, or you're working for the mission. And towards that mission, we were successful in attracting talented individuals in clinical space, in regulatory space, in legal space. So those who could help us in getting us to these contracts and things like that, and business space. So we formed a very small, nice, thoughtful team that was able to come together with the least amount of capital. And that has always been our thesis, because our thesis was, can you develop drugs, one, at the fastest pace, two, with the least amount of capital, bring it in front of strategics that are able to successfully make strategic investments into this type of an asset.
Yeah.
So the advice, I don't know if it's an advice or anything, but don't feel shy when someone comes and says, you got only, I don't know, 50,000 probably might be a luxury for some startups. So it's just the will and the idea, right? And what I want to see in investors, what I usually want to see in startups as an investor myself is that same conviction.
Sure. And yeah, like really can clearly tell you were very mission driven, and it seems the team that you built really understood that mission.
Exactly. And probably once you translate that vision mission for what you are convicted about onto your strategic investors and to your angel investors or to VCs, probably that's when they have that conviction for making that investment. They, as you have heard, it's not only the asset, but also, or the idea, but also the entrepreneurs that
Yeah.
are builders that are responsible for converting this. So in short, we took this entire journey from where we started about 2020, December 2020. So we signed our acquisition of asset on Christmas Day of 2020. And we then finally showed value proposition to investors as well as to strategic partners. And a very large strategic out of Israel has come in and acquired our asset with a very large strategic deal that was being done in June of this year. We're still tightly under the wraps, especially because the strategic that acquired us wants to make a big market splash in the next few months. And so we were asked to keep tightly under the wraps as part of the deal size, the deal structure, and everything else, because the only thing that I can tell you is they are investing about $40 million in the program
That's
to build the program to where it needs to be.
that's fantastic. And the patients are really
That's
impacted, and that's a goal.
that's exactly what we felt to, if someone was able to put that and take it forward. So we thought we could be the ones, but then what we became were enablers for getting there.
Well, yeah, thank you very much, Karen. I just want to get to, some of the questions from the audience.
Okay.
So we have a question from Kelly Howard.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was asking, will priZm Therapeutics, ever, or will anyone from your team, will you consider other rare diseases in the future?
Absolutely. The goal is that we would probably be putting them in separate pods or subsidiaries in which we could then raise capital for each of those diseases, so that particular disease gets undivided attention by the clinical team. But the goal is to have a overarching regulatory and legal and CMC teams that can help and support the clinical team to get their product up and running for clinical trials. As I said, if you can generate that top level data with the least amount of resources, and that's still the goal, bootstrap, get the clinical data with the least amount of resources, and the patients will value that, so that you can just bring it into a next big clinical trial with the help of major investors or with strategics. Most of the time, strategics are very interested in taking up that kind of an approach for investing in these pilot programs.
Basis, sure.
So the
And
answer is yes, we would like to. And if
yeah,
somebody has something, we would love to evaluate.
great. Well, yeah, hopefully we can, get some interaction here. And also, Mark Drew was asking, could you speak to, clinical endpoints that you use in MCT8?
Yeah, very good question. I think this is one of the biggest challenges, right? In terms of a lot of when you're doing biotech research, what type of clinical endpoints would be the one. Um, we because of uh, significant amount of natural history or data set that we have for so for MCT deficiency, there is a natural history study that's been conducted. And the publication came out right in 2020, telling us what the natural history of the disease looks like. So it was very evident within like first 4 months, these kids can't lift their heads because of the drooping head is the biggest challenge. Their head circumference because of the way the myelination and other things happen in the brain. And they have they can't put anything in the mouth where they'll not be able to swallow. That's one of the reasons why they start having these gastric feeding tubes. So other clinical aspects being their heart rates and their metabolic functions and their cardiovascular functions were all being studied, and they were all a part of the natural history. So our goal has been to can we correct these or help with all these conditions early on, and that was our first negotiation with FDA. And we went up to FDA. We said, we were strategic in asking FDA for biomarker driven and for primary endpoint, but then our secondary endpoints became clinical endpoints that correlate to the primary. So they agreed for the pivotal registration study with those endpoints, the clinical endpoints that we negotiated with them.
Right. And another question, just as far as identifying your patients. So really, is it like how do you identify your MCT8 patients so early? Is it family history, biomarkers, a combination?
It's a combination, but it's right now at this stage. A lot of patients do seek our clinicians because they are the well-renowned experts on the disease, and also they're part of these patient-focused groups like the Patient Foundation, well, MCT8 Foundation, AHDS Foundation. Like the chief medical officer is one of our colleagues who was able to bring patients through that foundation aspect as well to understand. But biomarkers is the key. Now we're bringing a lot of this patient advocacy into community endocrinologists, pediatric endocrinologists, because the typical pathway for this is it comes through a pediatrician to a pediatric neurologist. And if the pediatric neurologist understands that there is an underlying endocrinology aspect of it, then it comes down to a pediatric endocrinologist who then brings it to the experts like Sam and Roy. So we can, and probably this is what our acquirer has plans for right now. They are doing world's largest registry in Europe right now for this MCT deficiency, and they're generating this. And we also know that the specific gene carried by a female has been identified. It's called SLC16A2 gene, and that gene anyone can get that tested. So hopefully, once the drug gets approved, the increase in the prevalence rate will happen because then they can get tested.
Sure.
It can become part of the routine screening. Right now, in the neonatal stage, for the newborn, there is a heel prick test that's actually helpful. It's almost like how you check for bilirubin. You can get it checked for MCT deficiency, but you have to do an extra workup, which is not at your state laboratories as such.
Sure. Yeah, I was wondering about the neonatal stage, like how you really are able to, figure that out. But so I mean, that's great that you do have that test, but hopefully we can make that test a bit more prevalent as it's needed.
Yeah, exactly.
And a question as far as the investors. So, did the 399 no's that you got from investors as a founder change anything about the way that you approach your role as an investor at Honor Health?
No, I mean, as an investor, it's different, right? As an investor, it's all about, how much of that is going to be aligned with your organization, because it's not your personal approach, right? It's an organizational approach. What is the organization's goal in this? Um, we approached almost 300 plus of these investors, not just by out of blue or anything. We studied the market to identify who these potential investors could be, those who invest into biotech space, those who are known investors in the biotech space. But to our surprise, as I said, what we understood was that for me, the shocking thing was, oh, $200 million. That's peanuts. We don't invest in market caps with $200 million per year in sales and revenue. And I can't digest that. I mean, I was kind of like really surprised. I mean, I don't want to name names. I mean, remember there was a pretty big company that came in and they said that we are going to have a drug for Alzheimer's and it's going to cost and it's going to make close to like what, $6 billion per year. And the sales of the drug were like $100,000, right?
Yeah.
So you can never, I mean, that's the big challenge in the investor mindset, right? My thesis has become more, my conviction as an investor has become more strong with this process where I was able to now, as I look for companies as an investor, the science, that's one of the reasons why we back up our investment by strong science, strong thesis on the science. It has to be evidence-based. Show me an evidence-based in this. If it's another SaaS company that's coming up or a AI company that's coming up, what's your evidence? Do you have something done? So I think my investment thesis is a lot shaped from that kind of a structured, methodical, traditional, but you do have to take some chances on certain aspects by only looking at the science sometimes.
Sure.
So
Well,
this
good.
has
Thank you so
been,
much.
yeah, this has been a great conversation, guys. Thank you so much for doing it. And, I want to do a shout out to the state of Arizona and our legislators, because this year, Arizona established its Rare Disease Advisory Council. And that is intended to work with all of the stakeholders, the patients, the researchers, the clinicians, the payers, to ensure that we're doing what's right to help patients and families that are living with these diseases, because no patient wants to feel like an orphan.
Yeah.
So for everyone that is with us today, thank you so much for joining us for AZBioPEERS. Dylan, great job moderating. Kiran, thank you for not only doing this, but for your service on AZBio's board of directors. We truly appreciate your leadership across the ecosystem. And for everyone, make sure that you're showing up for Arizona Bioscience Week in October, because you're going to meet leaders like this over 5 days of events. And
That's
you
amazing.
will not want to miss it. So don't forget to go to the AZBio website and look at Arizona Bioscience Week. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in September for AZBioPEERS.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Take care. Bye-bye.